So this is the Lumix G85. It's a micro four thirds camera. I believe it's been out for almost 10 years, 8 to 10 years, but it's a nice compact photo camera. It was recommended by another channel, Nigel Barrows. He has a great YouTube channel, and he mentioned in one of his videos just how nice this setup is. It's got the 25mm f1.4 Summilux lens, so essentially you've got your 50mm equivalent. Just a nice compact photo camera. It feels good to shoot. It's been fun, and I wanted to make a video just taking it out for a day, shooting whatever I saw, and the county fair recently happened, and I thought there's always stuff to shoot at the county fair. I'll just take this camera and make a little video, just sort of the typical YouTube photography video. Here are some pictures from the fair with this camera, and I went to the fair and I was gonna make that video. I just couldn't bring myself to take any pictures. I just wasn't interested in anything going on. The light wasn't interesting. The events that were going on at the fair that day while I was there. Normally when I go to the fair, I see all kinds of stuff and just sort of the absurdity of the county fair. I think most people enjoy that kind of thing. And when I first walked in, I don't know what it was that was going on, but I don't know, there was a guy with a whip and he was on like an RV or something. I walked into the fair and saw that, and so I was kind of excited, but then I just didn't see anything else. And I like took a break. I tried to just like reset my mind a little bit and just start looking for different things or noticing different things, and nothing was clicking. And I think that's a normal thing, especially if you're in any sort of like just burnout grind kind of phase, whether it be with like work and real life stuff or your actual craft, whether it's photography or any other kind of art form. There are a lot of videos online about creative ruts and like ways to break through that burnout phase or that creative block. And I think there are ways you can work against it, and we'll kind of talk about that in this video, but I just don't think there's any way you can truly completely avoid it. I think you're always going to have to be working uphill at times. And maybe you would rather have that video where I just sort of take pictures that I'm not even interested in, and it's just me making pictures at the fair, and that's all there is to it. That's not going to be this video though. Personally, I feel better just sticking to just sort of the reality of it and like actually sharing where I'm at with photography. That's kind of how all of these videos are. It's never really videos for the algorithm. It's videos that are just sort of like, it's an ongoing visual kind of journal, this channel. So today I'm just going to kind of share where I'm at in this sort of creative rut or burnout phase, some of the things that I think are directly related to that, and also kind of how I plan to work through it. The biggest thing, I think, is the fact that I'm now post-surveyor release. Like, I spent so much time. In the grand scheme of things, it all happened very fast, but starting in late 2021 to now, I started working on these photos and then putting it together to make a book, getting it printed, getting it shipped out. Every time I publish a zine or a photo book, it's always this feeling of like, okay, what now? Like this directionless kind of feeling in regards to photography, where I don't have a specific goal or purpose when I leave the house. And when I see something, okay, that's interesting. Why? Why do I need to take that photo? Without an end goal or a place for these photos to live, I'm less likely to actually see things that are interesting, let alone take them. This is something that I used to be way better about. I shot photos with little to no hesitation. It didn't matter what the end goal was or what I was going to do with the photo. It was just I would see something and I would immediately react to it. And I'm trying to get back to that sort of just regular practice, I guess. More fun, less serious. This is what the whole idea of pretty pictures is really about. This is something I've been just kind of kicking around, just sort of behind the scenes for the last like 2 years, just thinking about how I want to do things as a photographer and being online, this whole job that I have now. I love the idea of working on a project and having all of the photos going together and having a story in mind or a feeling, an atmosphere in mind. But I also love just pretty pictures. And I think photography, as meaningful and impactful as it can be, as an art form, it's also, at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of pretty pictures. At least to me, you can kind of boil it all down to that. And I like the idea of not taking photography as serious in that way, because I think what most people outside of photography chalk it up to is like, oh, you're a photographer, you just take pretty pictures. And they're not really wrong when they say that, I think. Regardless of what it is you do, you see something, oh, I like the way that looks. I want to photograph that. Like, that's been the mindset from day one. And I don't think it really needs to be any more complicated or serious than that. So one of the ideas of pretty pictures, I kind of wanted to make pretty pictures as like this little umbrella for an outlet. It's a way for me to make things and release them. Giving the photos a place to live, making smaller zines or like quarterly publications where all of the photos that are just sort of scattered everywhere, where there is no single project or story or message or anything, these are just pretty pictures. And that's really all it has to be. Just giving the photos a place to live, I think that really helps me a lot. So that's one thing that I plan on working for in the immediate future, is just start putting these things together to make smaller publications, smaller runs, more affordable, less serious, and just more fun. But having a direction in general, just not having that after working on something, I think that's a big part of it for me, where I've just sort of felt like, okay, what's next? And the reality is, what's next is the kids are back in school. Today is day one of Nora and Elliot now being back in school. So 2 out of 3 kids at school for the day, even just that window of time for, 5 or so hours. I think any parent can relate to that. Just the amount of things you can get done, or just the ability to catch your breath for a minute. School days are very valuable and important assets to getting things done as a parent. Whatever your life looks like outside of photography, real life, real responsibilities, sometimes that stuff can just drain you, where all of your energy and efforts are focused there where they should be. But then your creative side and the energy you have there, your battery is just completely depleted. So I think lately I've just been in that like exhausted, burnt out kind of season. And that's not the first time that happens. And I think all of this comes in seasons. There are times where you're really creatively inspired, and then you have periods where other things take priority, or you just feel completely exhausted or overwhelmed. That's obviously going to have an effect on your creativity or your art. And me personally, I get really critical of myself when it comes to that, where if I'm not constantly making something or working on something, I get really critical of myself and my value as a person. I think if you continue kind of going in that direction or thinking that way, you're just digging even deeper into that sort of pit where you're not going to make anything, nothing's going to be good enough, and you just continue to sink further and further. But just remembering that, all of these things, like I mentioned, it's all seasons. There are going to be highs and lows with all of it. So just try not to beat yourself up too much if you're in that phase. Take into account all of the other things outside of photography or whatever your art form may be. Give yourself a little bit of slack there. Things are always crazy. I think anytime you mix income and passion, you're immediately increasing the chances of hitting that sort of burnout season. It's different now compared to when I was working with clients for weddings or portraits, anything where I was working with people and I had a subject and I was delivering for them. There was a way where I can, I'm working with somebody, and immediately, even if I felt like I was in a burnout kind of phase, the second I would get to a shoot or a job, I would just immediately be able to start connecting with that person, and that would pull it out of me. Whereas now, it's very different, where I'm sort of left to shoot whatever I want to shoot, which is amazing. Tough for someone who needs direction, as I mentioned earlier, but it's incredible. But I'm also kind of making these pictures for an audience, people who are watching these videos. And I spent years and years shooting stuff for myself without ever sharing it with anybody, let alone just people online and like the whole world. So it's just weird. The idea of having an audience or a following and knowing that there are people who are going to see the things I make and share, because that's just what I do now. It's wrecked my brain to the point where at times I would go out to shoot and I would see something, and rather than thinking about, okay, what am I responding to? How do I want to shoot this? Or where is this photo going to live? It's this idea of, okay, well, I'm gonna need to share the work I'm making because that's part of what I do now. How are people going to respond to this? Do they understand it? Do they need to understand it? What's the context here for this to make sense for other people? Is any of it even worth sharing in a video? All of that stuff can just completely cloud everything else. And anytime I kind of find myself in a situation like that, that's usually a good sign where I need to just kind of like reset and like take a beat. And as I share all of this stuff in my head, I think, yeah, poor you, right? Like, I acknowledge how lucky I am to be doing what I do for a living because it's something that I love. I've always said, regardless of what I do to make a living, whether it's photographing weddings, making YouTube videos about photography, as long as my job and what I spend my time doing to make a living revolves around photography, I'm happy. But if I'm gonna do this sort of thing and sharing my experiences, this is the kind of stuff I have to share if it's really gonna mean anything. I've got to be honest and acknowledge like where I'm really at in regards to photography. And just here lately, that's where I've been. And I think most people can relate to that, regardless of what your real life looks like, what your job looks like. Anybody pursuing a passion, it's really easy to hit these kind of roadblocks. And I think just acknowledging it and talking about it for what it is, I think it helps. I know it helps me, and I'm hoping that it helps you if you're watching this video. But what can you do? Obviously, like I mentioned earlier, I don't think there's any sort of way to avoid hitting these sort of creative ruts or roadblocks or burnout phases. I think they're inevitable, but I do think it's good to try and work through it because, again, it's going to pass. These things happen. You're not always going to feel as creatively uninspired as you are right now. So just continuing to try and do things to push yourself and to keep yourself engaged. For me, photo books, that's always the number one thing for me. If I'm feeling burnt out, if I go out and I just feel like I don't see anything, I immediately look through photo books and things start clicking again. It's not necessarily meaning that all of a sudden it's fixed and I can go out and shoot, but just keeping my mind and my eye engaged with the photographers that inspire me the most, I think that really goes a long way. I actually talk a little bit about this and pursuing projects, making photo books in a new interview I did over on KEH's blog. I'll have a link down below. Definitely check that out. It was super fun to catch up with them and just talk about Surveyor, post-Surveyor, what's next, and just sort of the whole process. They were such a big part of making that book happen. So big shout out to them. Check it out. I'll have a link down below. Another thing you can do is give yourself a photo exercise or an assignment. We've talked in the past about the Photographer's Playbook. That's a great book full of all kinds of different prompts, giving you basically an endless amount of things you could go out and shoot. If you're feeling creatively uninspired, tons of great ideas and prompts in that book. My good friend Wesley also just put out a brand new digital book called The Process Workbook, Assignments and Ideas for Becoming a Better Photographer. It's great. I'll put a link down below. You've got 30 assignments in there and ideas for you to get out and shoot, plus different quotes and interviews with other photographers. Amazing stuff. Wesley's always doing great work, so check that out as well if you're interested in finding sort of an assignment or something to kind of pull yourself out. I'll have links for that down below. And another thing that you can do if you're not looking for necessarily an exercise or being given something to go out and shoot, try and experiment. Try and find a different process or something you've never tried before. Anything you can do to try and see things a little bit differently. Lately, I've been experimenting with Polaroid collages in a way. You'll see a little bit of that in an upcoming video, but mixing Polaroids, cutting the backgrounds out of some and layering them, layering cut up Polaroids over an emulsion lift, just experimenting, just having fun and playing more. Those are the things I really want to work on as a photographer or an artist, just trying to step out of my comfort zone a little bit more. But that's where I'm at lately, and I'm curious if you've been feeling that way as well. I hope you enjoyed this little, creative therapy session. It was fun for me to just kind of talk about all of it. I know there are other people going through similar kind of things as well, so if you're one of those people, let me know in the comments down below. And last but not least, a huge shout out to the sponsor of this video, KEH Camera. Over 40 years, they've been in business buying and selling used photography gear. Anytime I'm buying gear, I'm always looking through KEH because their inventory is massive. It's growing every day. Everything is thoroughly cleaned, tested, and graded so you know what kind of condition you're going to be buying for. Along with a free 180-day warranty and a 21-day return policy, you can shop with peace of mind. Whether you're buying or selling used gear, make sure you do it with KEH Camera. I'll have links and codes down below. The codes are going to save you some money or get you a bonus on your quote. And just shopping through the links, that goes a long way at supporting the channel at no extra cost to you. So thank you again to KEH Camera for sponsoring this video and supporting this channel. But that's it for this video. If you guys have any questions or thoughts of your own, maybe ways that you kind of get out of those creative ruts, leave them in the comments down below. But that's all for today. So thank you all for watching. I love you guys, and I'll see you soon.